And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to another Reasonably Fine Art Talk with your friend Charlie Hunter. Now, those of you who watch this show regularly know we've got a copy of Richard Schmidt's Alla Prima, and it's time for us to pass it on to the next person now. So if you would like to look at Richard Schmidt's Alla Prima 2 for a couple of months, because you don't want to spend $85 to $120 for it, just say that in the comments, and the one of you I'll choose, and we'll set it up, and you'll get it. You have to promise to do the color charts. That's the only requirement. And then in a few months, we'll ask you to pass it on to someone else. But anyway, enough blather, ladies and gentlemen, enough blather. Today, we have a very, very special guest, a towering figure in the plein air world, our friend from Oklahoma, the great watercolorist, Jeff Williams. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Charlie. It's wonderful to be here. I've really enjoyed your program, so it's great to be a part.
That is the correct thing to say. If you said you did not enjoy them much at all, but were putting yourself through this, it would be sort of disappointing. Now, Jeff, how'd you come to do what you do? Take us very quickly through the journey of Jeff Williams from European tourist to towering figure in the plein air world. Talk to us.
Well, I did do a lot of travel in Europe, but prior to that, I loved to draw when I was young. But my grandfather was an architect, and so whenever I would express interest in the arts in the family, they would say, well, he's going to be an architect. And I mean, what did I know? So I followed that path, and I really loved it. I loved practicing. I loved teaching. I did pretty well in that, and as a result, won a major fellowship that the prize was to funding to travel overseas for a year. And so that got me in Europe the first time. We sold our house and our.
Sorry, I'm going to throw those sketches, the sketches that you did, up on the screen since we're talking about that right now. So
okay, well, there's a few different examples there. The two on the left and then the upper central one were actually done back in '82 when I was on that first trip, and I used that trip to kind of teach myself to draw, mostly with pencil, sometimes with ink, but I carried Samuel Chamberlain's pencil sketching book with me, and Ted Kotsky's pencil broadsides, and just tried to learn technique as well as learn to see, and you can see from some of that back then I was mostly looking at things as objects. But later, as I did more sketching over the years, I started to see space as well as object.
Yeah, I think
there's
a beautiful evolution in these two slides from the depicting of things into the depicting of environs.
Well, I appreciate that. I had to put the railroad crossing there just for you, but
and we appreciate that.
Well, one of the things I love about sketching or painting on site is the way that it keys you into a place and you retain those memories in a way that's different than if you just had taken a photograph. So for example, the railroad crossings. My youngest daughter is an architect now, and she draws better than I do. And I just loved, years ago, I loved to go out sketching with her. So that was one from our hometown, not Europe. But I had done a sketch and I was kind of waiting on her. So this was sitting there, and I thought, well, I'll just capture that too. But anyway, I like to really vary and experiment with mediums, with technique. So I could have shared more of those with you, but I know we have a limited time.
Oh, no. Let's go back onto that then. Yeah, because I think the what the cool kids call a no-tan, that high contrast one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
that,
architecture, we called that figure ground, but it was just an experiment, um, like all the others. I try to think of my sketches as well as my paintings as experiments rather than final products. So,
uh-huh. Now, do you maintain a regular sketching practice?
you know, I should do more. I used to, but I try and paint every day. Whether I'm sketching every day or not really varies. But as you know, once you start painting full time, there's a lot of other things that need to get done as well. So my focus has been more on painting. But uh,
Right. But now, Caggiano says, hi, little brother. And Tim Oliver says, Jeff is the best.
oh, he's terrific. Both of those guys, I could share some great photos of them too.
Uh, anyway, so we got you over to I've gotten sidetracked. Keep us going with the journey.
um, so anyway, I went into practice after traveling. I had taught some before I left, and a little bit after I came back before I found where I'd settle in. But I practiced out of Minnesota for several years with a large firm that I did work all over the country, large projects. I really liked complex projects. I liked problem solving, and I thought of design as problem solving. Um, and maybe we'll come back to that when we talk painting. But um, I worked on very large projects, some of which you might know, but that doesn't matter. I was recruited to come back here to teach in Oklahoma, where I had grown up in New Jersey, moved to Oklahoma during high school, and then went to school here in Oklahoma. And when I was in school and doing these competitions, which were based on old Beaux-Arts sort of esquisses, which had very elaborate presentations, I fell in love with the drawing part of that, the communications. And I had incredible mentors here. The faculty that I worked with, I became really close with. And so when they asked me to return to teach, I was ready to make some sort of change, and I thought, well, I'll try that for a little bit. But it was just a fabulous part of my career to be with what were my mentors, and then learn to teach with them and spend time with them and contribute to what they were building was really special opportunity to me. I think a couple of them may even be online here watching this. So if so, thank you guys. I love you. But
And then how did you get into the plein air world? How did this come about?
I fell in love with watercolor paintings and renderings through architecture, really. So I, for a long time, had the desire to learn to paint in watercolor. But I'm a workaholic probably, and I was sleeping very little. I was teaching full time. I was practicing part time, raising kids, doing construction on my house, and I just didn't feel like I could take painting on and give it what I thought I would feel the need to give it. And so I just started collecting books and looking at that during a lunch hour or when I had time, looking online once that came about. But I did that for probably 25 years before I started painting. And I near the end of my teaching time, I took a couple of workshops, painting workshops, that I hoped would push me into doing that, at least to some degree. But then I had other things that came up, family issues, health issues. So I never thought I'd retire, but I decided to retire early. And my plan was to travel and learn to paint, just like I'd learned to sketch.
Right.
And in the process of taking those workshops, though, some of my mentors shared that the best way to learn was by painting in plein air. And I had my background in sketching and doing that from life. And so I just naturally moved into that and, brought with it my understanding of design and composition and perspective and drawing and so on. But I had a lot of catching up to do with the paint. But I
So,
also, during that time, had met Richard Sneary,
right.
another dear friend and mentor. And Richard, um, well, he kept pushing that I should do this on the plein air circuit. And honestly, I had no interest in doing that. I told him, no, I would hate that. I don't want any part of that. I'm not interested in competition. I'm just painting for myself and want to have something to learn with through the rest of my days. And he was persistent. And I finally applied to some plein air events, mainly to get him off of my back. But I had gone down to Texas, the plein air Texas event, and met a lot of what are now friends of mine, with the intent of trying to explore and see what these were like, fully expecting to hate it. And I spent the week there with them and asked them, many of them, Caggiano and Longbrower and Kathleen Hudson and Susan Lynn and a number of others that we'd get together at dinner, and I'd ask them all, why do you do this? Because it didn't compute with me why you would compete with something that to me was about other things. And invariably, they all said the exact same thing, and they point at each other or point at the discussion going on over dinner and say, for this is my peer group. They get me. I get to do things other than have a solitary life as an artist, whether it's on plein air or in the studio. So
Right.
I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. And then I saw the show at the end of the event. Oh my God, they still excite me. Every event I'm at, I love seeing the show at the end, to see hundreds of paintings done by incredible artists that were all done that week in that location, often many of the same subjects, but so different. It was such a rich environment to learn from. And when someone would win an award, the other artists were genuinely happy for them. They weren't competing with each other. They were competing, I think, with themselves to do their best work. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. That'd be a great way to learn. So I eventually did get on the circuit and
About
then
what year would that have been that you started on the circuit?
I started painting in 2018 and I started on the circuit in 2019. So it was pretty quick. And so I had a lot of learning to do as I tried to prove that I belonged there, at least in my own mind.
Well,
That's what I was doing.
I think you raise a really good point about the quote unquote competitions, because that's what people hear,
Right.
when you say I'm doing this event and it's a painting competition. They're like, oh, that sounds awful. But the competition that's hung on the event in order to draw a crowd, because the presenters need to make money, and they've got to build a story. And if you just say a bunch of painters are coming and painting for a few days, I think everybody would say, that's nice. But by having it be a competition, then it excites people. But it really is so far from what the actual thing is. I mean, it's just a chance, right, for us not to be so isolated.
Well, I think there's a lot of these guys are using the circuit to make a living. And so there are great opportunities to sell paintings and make an income that way. But also there's prize monies through that competition. And I think for some people, they feel some pressure to do that. But I can honestly say when I have won awards, people have been thrilled for me, and vice versa. I'm so excited when one of my friends has a success and it gets recognized. So
absolutely. Well, let's take a look at some of your paintings and let's go through it. So the sketches are an integral part, ladies and gentlemen, of Jeff's practice, and everyone should do lots of sketches. Now, I think this is great that you supplied kind of some of your earlier pieces and where you are as you have evolved. So the one on the left is called Almost Home, and it's of a hilly Texas dirt road from 2018. And then the second one is called Section Road from 2020 of a hilly Texas dirt road. But there is a definite evolution that is going on here. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, these are both within a few miles of my home. And so they were,
Sorry,
they,
Oklahoma rather than Texas. Sorry
oh,
about
that's fine. That's fine. But the similar character. You've been in Texas and
that.
probably painted things or seen others paint things like this. And I was just learning to put paint down and try and communicate. They both were, in their ways, successful paintings. I really liked the one on the left as I did it. And that was probably the first time I thought, oh man, I think I could do this.
Uh,
And they both, I don't know, won some sort of awards. I don't remember what now, but um, the one on the right, I think, was selected for a show during COVID. And it, it I think that was something John Caggiano connected me to, the Great American Paint In or something like that. And um, it was, they put a book together and stuff, but I don't know. I probably have less to say about that one than the first one. I had a lot of emotional feeling in the first one, and it was a little looser technique, and they were just continuing to experiment in one way or another, but similar color palettes, similar contexts.
right now, these two, once again, you've got a 2019 Rockin' Bass Rocks, that's a plein air. And then the one
Correct.
on the right is here called Here Comes the Nor'easter. And I believe it's of the exact same rocks, but it is a studio piece.
Correct, and it's certainly from the same location, and I had done the plein air piece, so I had that in mind when I was doing the studio piece, although it had sold long before. The plein air piece was actually done at Cape Ann when we first met back in, that must have been 2019.
Must have been.
um, and I would go from event to event, especially that year, and every experience was new. I'd never painted swamps before, or I'd never painted mountains before, or I'd never painted the coast before, I'd never painted boats before. Each time there was some new challenge that I was trying to just figure it out.
Right.
And so I had thought for a couple of weeks, how will I do surf painting and I did a few things like that during the week, but I had not really painted the rocks like this and the surf in an intimate way. I turned in all my paintings that week on Friday or Thursday or whatever the day was that we did turn-ins. And I still had a couple hours. My wife was going to do laundry, and I said, I'm just going to go out and experiment with this and see if I could do it. And so that was about a 45-minute painting that just fell into place. Sometimes I'm sure you've had this experience, and I don't know why this happens, but sometimes things work almost sort of miraculously. I'm not trying to say that's a miraculous painting, but it was a miraculous experience for me. And I felt like the things that I thought about and the experiments that I was trying were working. And it seemed like or felt like it was with relative ease. So I hurried up and finished that painting. I did it from in my car because the winds were rocking the car back and forth and the rain started pouring down, and I could see that view through my windshield when I started, but by the time I was done, I couldn't see anything except Kirk Larson's face when he jumped on my windshield and scared me half to death. But I rushed back and I actually got this one in the show, hoping, oh gosh, I hope this one wins an award, and a different one won an award, but this was later recognized as outstanding watercolor in an online competition somewhere. So I had that memory. I started the more current version of that in the studio, and I tried to do something very similar. We can never completely implement, at least in watercolor. Your watercolor has a mind of its own a lot of the time, and so I try and just accept that and go with the
Right.
flow.
What it reminds me, what you're describing reminds me of what Larry Moore says about painting with gouache. He says it's like taking a pet bear out for a walk.
I
Like,
like that.
oh, we're going to go this direction. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I wish
anyway,
I could come up with those clever sayings like you guys do, but I'm just a dull architect. But
exactly.
but anyway, it clearly communicates differently, and I think just the fact that you're in the studio and you're spreading the time out, you're not intensely in the moment. Uh, it winds up feeling different, and there's more detail in it, and neither of them use a lot of opaque white in the painting. It's mostly the white of the paper, but there are a few places in the more recent one that I did splatter a little bit of white, and the foreground water on the rocks was put back in with a white watercolor, and some people think that's not pure. To me, it's just about making a painting.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. A couple. There are a bunch of people. You're a very popular man. You're a very popular man. I see here. Tim Kelly says, "Greetings to my fellow member of the back row of the group picture club."
well, hi Tim, I appreciate that. I hope at some point we talk about the Rattlesnake Gang and the Owls, but
So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. We've got a Ham Van Arsten says, "Hi guys, greeting from the Netherlands." Um, let's see. Margie Hildreth says hi. A whole
oh,
bunch of
Margie.
people are watching. So, and Rick Wyckoff says, "Hi, Professor Williams." So,
Rick's making his own explorations through watercolor now. It's exciting for me to see.
oh,
Uh,
terrific. Now
yeah.
this one is called Big Bend Chill, studio watercolor from 2022. Tell us the story of this one.
Well, this was based on some photographs that I took down in Big Bend. We go down to Big Bend as a group, the Rattlesnake
Yeah,
Gang,
let's
every year.
let's talk about some rattlesnakes here.
Oh my gosh, they have been so important to me in this painting journey. Richard Sneary started this group along with Tim Oliver, and when I joined in 2018, they invited me to come, and I just found it a really rich environment. It was Tim and Richard and Greg Summers and Lon Brower and myself. So it started as a small group, and I just fell in love with Big Bend. But it was a rich time to talk painting in the evenings and get to know each other and learn about people's experiences in art when it was all new to me.
Mhm.
And so it was a very interesting and supportive environment. And one particular year we were headed there, it was a couple years later. I don't remember what date it says on this painting, but um, we it was the year that Texas had their historic freeze, and they had all their energy problems. The entire state was shut down. Um, we were trying to drive down there during that storm, and I got caught in the storm on the way down and had to really slow down. It was mostly driving through ice for a couple of days, but I did make it. There were four of us that were able to make it that year. The others had to turn back and just go home. Power was out throughout the state. Water was out throughout the state. Gas stations had shortages and shut down. And so we were stuck down there for a day or two extra too. But and parts of the park got shut down, but we were able to still explore in some parts of the park. And it was so cold and miserable that we really didn't want to sit out there and paint, at least for us more Southerners that don't, live in Vermont or something.
Yeah,
And
I'm over. being outside and freezing my butt off.
Well, some people are really good at that or enjoy it, but
Like doing it.
I
Yeah,
liked photographing it and then staying warm.
right.
But I got back, I saw the desert and the snow. I saw clouds over the mountains or mists that were just amazing in this desert. And I had to try something like this when I got home. And this was another one of the paintings that happened very quickly, like that surf painting did. Maybe because I'd thought about it for a period of time before I just jumped in. But and there's one tiny little place in this. I'm not going to tell you where it is, where I used an opaque white to try and bring back a shape.
Uh-huh.
But the rest of that is all from the paper.
Well,
So
it's the thing I think is fascinating about this is that it's almost the reverse of a traditional landscape in that the lightest areas are the foreground, uh, and you've got this kind of lacy play of the twigs in the foreground moving to the beautiful contrast of the paddle cacti. And then in the background is this almost Wyeth-esque. I don't even know really what scale that is, but it works. It
yeah.
works so beautifully.
Well, that's about the size of probably many of your paintings. It was, I think, 8 by 16. But
That is
and like yours, it's a pretty neutral palette, which I tend to do. I don't know if you want to talk about that at some point too, but
talk about
um,
it. This is your chance to shine, my friend.
uh,
This is your chance to shine.
I want to share. I want other people to learn. It's not about me shining, but I appreciate the audience, Charlie.
All right. Well,
Um,
why do you use a neutral palette?
Pardon me?
Why the neutral palette then, Jeff?
You know, I don't know. It's just natural to me, and I don't think it's because of architecture. You thought I'd have a complicated answer, but I look back before I even started studying. When I arrived at college, you have your new dorm room and you go buy posters to put on the wall, and everybody was buying, I don't know, Farrah Fawcett posters or Star Wars posters or something, and I bought Brock and Picasso posters, and I knew nothing about them really. But the color palettes, they were their gray and brown cubist paintings, and they just appealed to me, and I've always sort of been drawn to that. And I have painted with a good bit of color in some paintings, and it honestly it just never feels natural to me. And this is kind of the way I see, I think.
Well, the other
Um,
what appeals to me about the neutral, especially like in this one, is you just need to go to a hint of blue and something reads very blue, or a hint
right.
of warmth and something reads very warm. So it's by living in the middle there, the relative shifts can be so much more subtle that everything maintains a cohesiveness uh,
Yeah.
within a fairly small band, it seems to me. And I
Yeah.
think this is a beautiful example of that.
Well, I appreciate that. I really enjoy doing that. Maybe a couple other things about this painting. One, you mentioned the twigs and stuff in front. When I haven't painted something before, I really see the painting as an experiment, and I got to figure out how to do different things as I'm progressing.
Mhm.
And I really liked the way this painting was going, but I hadn't done any of that foreground yet. And I was terrified about, how do I do that? How will that work? But, what do I do? And what I've tried to do is not have a fear in taking these experiments, but just think of the paper, the painting as a piece of paper, and if it doesn't work, I'll throw it out and do another one.
Right.
And I just sort of started experimenting with some branches there, and I thought, oh, this could work, and then it takes you another step, and you try some splattering along with it, or rubbing the edge of the brush to create the flowered pods on the end of the twigs, or whatever. But those sort of experiments are really fun for me, and one of the real reasons I enjoy doing this. The other thing we didn't talk about from when we were talking about sketches, but um, what I love about sketching is that you really have to look at something to draw it, or to draw it well, effectively. So I had painted some cactus, just normal cactus before, and without the snow on it. And in doing so, looking at it closely in life, I started to realize there were all these organic shapes and forms to the cactus plant itself, but when you look at a cactus leaf, there's a very predictable pattern of the, I don't know what the pieces are called. I don't know much about cactus except that there's a rectangular grid on the cactus leaf of those thorns. And I just found that sort of order in nature really interesting. And so when I was doing this, I know it looks very random, but there's a very intentional laying out in different perspectives of those grids at a detail level too. And it's fascinating to see those things to me.
Well, it's a masterful piece, and
Bless
you know,
you.
Margie says it's one of her favorite paintings.
Uh,
Sarah Hannah says proud of you, Pops.
Well,
And
that's my daughter that draws so well,
well,
and Pops is what the grandkids call me. So
very good.
yeah.
And Mike Simpson says, "Hey guys, I completely agree with the idea of a monotone, simple palette. For him, for Mike, it's more honest. You can't hide behind lots of color."
Ah,
So
yeah.
anyway, that's a great painting. That's a great painting.
Thanks.
Now
Thanks.
I here's a totally different. Speaking of not using lots of color, here you are using lots of color on some florals.
Well, and I don't paint florals very often, but I had a dear friend and patron that had bought several paintings, and she had seen a floral that I experimented with and said she loved it, but she would want to buy one in red. Would I do a floral painting in red for her? And I said, well, if you let me just experiment. And I tried three different paintings. I did three different paintings for her to choose from. She purchased these two. But I kind of see this, and I know there's a lot of color in it, but I still see it as a pretty monochromatic use of color. It's not a diverse range of color in
Right,
general. So,
right. You've just moved everything to the red spectrum. So
right, right.
now
So,
this piece, this one of Swan Afternoon. This is the Swan House in Atlanta, where at the Olmsted we go. Those who do it go every year, I think. This really reminds me of Dick Sneery's work in that this is a portrait of the structure from the formal gardens, but it also, to me, it has your stuff has more. Um, there's a brushy. It's not overtly brushy, but there's more a languid quality. Can't think of a technical word, but the atmosphere is more languid than Dick's work. This piece seems to me to be closer to the Sneery side of things, though there is still a softness to it that I see. So this is an 1114 plein air. How long would this have been? Because normal plein air painting, we've got about 3 hours before the light fundamentally changes. So
yeah. And I should have written, I'm surprised I didn't write plein air, and finished in the
oh no,
studio because,
it says plein air / studio. So I'm sorry.
okay. Well, that's why it's a little more complicated in its use of paint, but it was a complicated subject that I started on site and got first several layers of watercolor on. But we were just there for a day, and I'd done three other paintings that day of other views of the house. I just love the Swan House.
Right.
And so I've done quite a few paintings down there of that, and I always wanted to try and tackle this sort of classic one that most of the painters gravitate toward. In fact, I really take it as a compliment that you talk about Richard's work in combination with this, because he was sitting right next to me, or a few yards away. We tend to enjoy spending time when we're together there at these events, and he did a version of this that, of course, like Richard's, all of Richard's paintings, they turn out exquisite.
Right.
He's just a master of washes to me, and I in this particular painting, I wound up building up a lot of the tone to get the light on the house, or the
Mhm.
the depth of the forests, and um, the distance between where you're standing and where the house is. So
But I mean, that's such a high stakes game you're playing here by putting those gentle washes on the brightness of the house.
yeah.
If you screw up, you've really killed the light in the painting, haven't you?
Well, that's true with every watercolor. That
That's why I stay away from it.
you've done some beautiful things with watercolor too. I loved following your year with Andy Evenson,
That was fun.
who's a great painter as well. But I admired that you'd jump into that, and not only that you'd jump into it, that you'd share it publicly.
Oh,
um,
well, I
I'm,
think that's
I'm,
great. I mean, you said early on that you like sharing, you like teaching. I think it's really worthwhile to show that, yeah, we're professionals, but we're still all just learning, and experimenting is so much fun.
yeah, yeah. I hope I keep doing that until I can't paint anymore. But in a similar way, I've been really fascinated with your uh, water-based oil paintings, and see that medium maybe as an interesting crossover between watercolor and oil. And so I have been trying to play along those lines as well. I got my own copy of Richard Smith's book now, and I've done all the color mixing exercises, and I need to now get your video on techniques so that I can jump in there.
This one, I love this painting because it it
Yeah.
it feels to me it could be a cover of Fortune magazine from the 1960s. It, it's that it is both. It has a sense of place, but it is so close to an abstract, almost collage sort of piece. It says it's a 14 by 11 plein air watercolor from 2022 called "It's a New Day, It's a New Dawn." Talk to
Yeah.
us about this one.
Well, it's interesting you describe it. I'm glad that you see it that way, because when I saw this view, I did see it as a collage more than an interior rendering, and a collage that had some dramatic light flashing across it in different ways. I don't know if that reads well enough or not, but that's what I was trying to play with.
Mhm.
And the reason I even found it in the first place, I had arrived at this site where this barn was very early in the morning to catch the fogs that had been in this area. This was in not, I think, yeah, Bath County, Virginia. And they had some wonderful landscapes. And I started a painting in the fog outside of this barn. But there was so much moisture in the air, it was taking a long time to dry.
Right.
And I tend to do multiple paintings at the same time. And so I thought, well, I gotta keep being productive. I'll let this dry, and I went searching for another painting, and I found this inside the barn where I thought I can do a completely different painting at the same time, which was interesting to me mentally, and it kept things going. Well, then I was waiting on that one to dry too. The other one still hadn't dried, so I started a third one outside after the fog had cleared. So I had three of them going kind of at the same time. And this, I think, was the most successful of the three. But I like doing that so I can just one it one of the things I like about painting in the studio is stepping away from the work and then looking at it with a fresh eye. Even if it's just 30 minutes later, you do something to interrupt your mental process, whether it's read or get a cup of coffee or whatever. When you look at it again and you see it with different eyes, maybe hopefully fresh eyes, and that happens when I bounce back and forth between paintings too. And so I'll intentionally try and do that sometimes as well. The Swan House, I think I've painted 6 or 7 times, and uh, usually 2 or 3 at the each year. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's you're so right about it, the good thing about working on multiple pieces is that you also don't ruin. You know, we us humans always want to be doing something, and it's so easy to ruin a painting because you're, well, I got to do something to it. Whereas if you
Yeah.
just get away from it,
You know, when we were working down in Big Bend, Tim was always so great at being so patient with his washes. And he would stand there and he'd mop up the drips and he'd find things to fill his time with so they didn't jump in and ruin the wash.
right.
And my patience level isn't as good as his, I guess. And I wound up ruining many a wash by not waiting long enough. So this is a way that I can manipulate that. And
CC says, as an oil painter, can't even imagine thinking in the way needed to do watercolor. These examples are very effective and evocative.
oh, thank you, CC.
Good.
You know, that's one of the reasons I didn't point out, but one of the reasons that the oil experiments are really interesting to me because it's the I think of it anyway, without a lot of experience. I think of it as the exact opposite in thought process, where this you're having to really clearly know where you're going from the very beginning, and if you lose those lights, then you're lost. You know, the
Right.
painting's not going to work. And so you preserve those and gradually build the painting up. Where I think of the oils as things where I could go back and capture that light or put white on top or mark make in something to make it a different sort of application. And the contrast in the thought processes are probably what interests me as much as anything else.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Now,
Yeah.
this one I have a particular soft spot for because it's in my collection.
Well,
Give us the story of this one.
oh, you know, this was another case where I did several paintings at once. I found this old cotton gin complex really fascinating, and so I could have painted there all week, honestly.
It's an amazing place. It's that little village just north of San Angelo or some
North
direction.
and east or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
way to Ballinger. It's on the way to Ballinger.
right,
Yeah,
right.
but
Yeah, and so I did 3 paintings on this site, somewhat in parallel, and each of them with a different focus, and just letting parts of it dry and going back and doing another part there. And Shelby Keefe was around the corner, and yeah, Rowena, thank you, John. Uh, and yeah, it was some of the old guys would come over and talk to you, and I'd have a clue what you thought was interesting about this old dump of a place. But
why are you painting that? Uh,
yeah,
but
because Charlie might like it.
the thing I love about this is the awareness you have of what that underside brings to this. Without that underside of the dominant structure,
Right.
this would be a competent painting, but that underside is just almost to me, it's almost an imposition of a Franz Klein painting on top of an atmospheric watercolor. I think to me it's just I just love looking at it.
Well, you made my day, sir, because you know how much I think of you. But when you said you were interested in trading paintings, I love the relationships we have with the different artists and seeing the different ways that they paint, and trading paintings has become one of my favorite things on the circuit. And I traded with a couple people at Cape Ann this past fall. But when you, I was never bold enough to ask you to trade, and you suggested you'd be interested in a trade. Boy, my heart leapt.
Well,
I tried not to look really cool, but inside I was screaming.
that's very kind of you. It's very kind of you. I love this painting.
Well, yours is up in my living room right now. So,
All right. Well, enough log rolling.
yeah.
Let's talk to us about this one. This is it is behind you right now in your studio.
Oh, yeah.
It is a plein air and studio watercolor from this year. And it looks like on the right, I'm going to expand to full screen just as we look at it for a minute. This is a picture of your drawing of the actual structure.
Right.
And then on the left is the completed piece. So take us through this process.
Well, I had stumbled across this place about 6 miles from my house when I was headed somewhere else. And I just was really taken by the structure. And so I went back out there with the intention of, I photographed initially so I could remember it, and then went out there to explore it visually. I didn't do any small sketches. I thought I knew what I wanted, at least in this first painting. I hope to do quite a few of this building, but um, this sort of elevation view seemed to make sense to me as a way to capture what I was taken with this time. I did the drawing on site, and a little bit of the first washes, and then I took quite a bit of time over the next few months, off and on, coming back to this because I just had other things going on.
Right.
But one of the things that I want to do now, I still love the plein air events, but they structure the way that I paint anyway. In that I have a limited amount of time. I'm trying to produce a body of work and not just one great painting during the week or something. And so that affects the size that I work at, and the trying to have a diversity of subject matters. And I try and make each painting different in some way. Um, and all of that is good, but I'm naturally, I think, drawn to just spending more time and thought on a painting. And I've been wanting to paint bigger than the plein air events allow me. So this was really my first time to be able to jump in. And this is my first full sheet painting. And I just had a ball doing it. And I could come back and forth and do it over the course of a few months. I couldn't tell you how long I actually spent on it in the end because of that. But it's still somewhat, at least a neutral palette. I think of it as somewhat monochromatic.
Wedler Fine Art asks, what is your go-to palette?
This painting, I think just had four, maybe five colors, but mostly three. There's burnt sienna, there is raw sienna, and ultramarine blue. There's a little bit of cobalt in the sky, and maybe for a wash or two over some of the wood. And then on the masonry, I have I don't even remember what the paint color is called, but it's a stronger, brighter orange type red that I think Tim told me about, a brand of paint that he'd learned from Ian Stewart or something. And I was just trying that because it gave me a little brighter color on some of those rock faces.
Uh-huh.
But gosh, with just the basic burnt sienna, raw sienna, and ultramarine, I can go a lot of different directions and grays, and do have those subtle color variations that you talk about. So that's a very common palette for me.
Right. Well, it's certainly effective, and I mean, it's human nature that we all want there to be a Deus ex machina. Oh, if I get this one color, my paintings are going to be wonderful. But I think you've done a wonderful job today explaining or showing your evolution, and you know how to draw. So therefore, knowing how to paint was a very quick. You said you started painting about 2018. You went on the circuit in 2019, or
Yeah.
that you had done your homework, and so consequently, you've had this kind of meteoric rise in our little world. And I know you're expanding more into get to galleries and stuff now. Now, do you also do teaching and workshops?
I've done a little bit of that when requested, but it's not. I taught for so long in architecture um, and enjoyed it thoroughly. I feel like I learn as much or more than the students do when you're teaching. But at the same time, I really, this may sound terrible, but I look at the amount of time I have left in my life, and I know it's limited, and I
Right.
want to maximize that. And right now, that's in my mind. It's necessary to paint to do that, to be productive, and so I haven't taught very much. I haven't reached out to do that, but I do enjoy it. So
Right. No, and I'm with you. I hear you. So I think this has just been a wonderful uh, stroll through your oeuvre, as we say.
well, you're going to have to tell me that word that you used before too. I don't even remember what it was now.
I don't remember what it was either, so you're out of luck on that one.
Okay. Well, I'll go back and watch and then write you and ask about that if I can
All
figure
right.
out how to spell it.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. It's
Thank you. Hey,
really,
can I make one request?
yeah, sure. Well,
I have really, parallel to doing this bigger work, I've tried to continue to educate myself because I don't have a background in art education. I didn't go through an art program, and so I'm doing a lot of reading and immersing myself in why other painters do what they do, or how they do what they do, or what happened in different periods in history. And I love reading and researching that sort of thing. And I would love to see a program sometime on books that you find valuable, or where maybe you have a group that can share uh, uh, learning opportunities like that with the public.
all
So.
right. We'll get to work on that. We'll get to work on it. And until then, we'll be back probably next week with another reasonably fine art talk. Thank you so much, Jeff. It was great.
Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, you're wonderful. I appreciate this.
Bye bye.